Okay, yeah, maybe we can get started. So thanks for joining, Will. I think you don't really need an introduction anymore because you've made yourself quite a name with your channel Monkey Steals Peach. And this is, I think, how we first got into contact. You did your series on Xingyi Quan, and I noticed that, and I really liked it, and thought the way you portray things is like very special because it's not so flamboyant, but it's more like really authentic, and how people train in China. So I thought that's really nice, and I think it really sticks out from what we see nowadays a lot on the internet. So maybe you can give yourself an introduction and tell people a bit about yourself.
So I I started martial arts in 2004 when I was 14 years old. That was in the UK, in York, and I used to watch a lot of kung fu movies with my friends, and I'd done like karate and taekwondo and stuff as a kid. But then after watching all these kung fu movies, I was like, I'm going to go and learn kung fu. So I started Googling, what was around in the area, and Wing Chun was, I think, the only Chinese style that was available at the time. So I did 3 years of Wing Chun in one school, and it was quite, how would I say? It was quite watered down in that after 3 years, I thought I was a lot better than I was. And then I met this teacher who had a different Wing Chun school. And I went to his school thinking I was like really, really good. And he's like, oh, how much have you learned? I was like, oh, I've learned everything. I know the whole system. I know all the forms. I'm a black sash. And so he's like, oh, great. I'll have you spar with my senior students then. And I mean, these guys just kicked my ass. It was really, really humbling. So I then was, my eyes were opened, and I switched to that school, and I started to learn again. And that teacher, John Bates, I still keep in touch with him up to now. I have a lot of respect for him. And he kind of encouraged me to go to China, actually. I had the idea in my mind anyway, but he often, because he'd been over to China a lot, he was a Tuina, Chinese massage practitioner. So he went over there like every year for his Chinese medicine stuff. And he trained other styles besides Wing Chun when he was in China. So he like strongly encouraged me to move to China, or to visit China. So I went there in 2007, and that was initially, I was just backpacking around for 6 months. So I went to China, I went down to Hong Kong, then I went through Tibet, Nepal, and India. And then having had that 6 months of travel and these amazing experiences, I went back to England, and I suddenly felt really restless and bored, and I'd had a taste of adventure, and I wanted more. So I ended up moving to.
Back then?
It's what? Sorry.
Did you already start your travel blog back then?
Oh, I had a very small blog called Empty Your Cup. I don't think anyone even read it, but just writing about things I was doing in China, and I did a little bit of martial arts training, but not very much.
But you didn't do any videos back then?
No, I don't even think YouTube was even a thing in 2007. I don't really think it was.
I think in 2007 it was, but yeah, like 3 years before there was no YouTube there. Unimaginable. But yeah, you're right. I think, I don't know, I can't remember when it really started. But before, it was really difficult to get any good Kung Fu material online, to see any video material. I remember there were like very dubious portals where you could actually see anything.
Yeah, I can remember a couple of channels. Like, there's a Malaysian guy called Eric Ling who has a lot of Southern stuff. And then I think Tea Serpent was one of the old ones, and there was only like 2 or 3, and they were just a lot of footage, like old footage from China that I guess they'd found on Chinese platforms. And I remember thinking this stuff was like so special and sacred, and these were videos of real Chinese masters, you know, even though they were so low quality and they weren't really showing very much.
And how did you or when did you start with Monkey-Steal speech?
So when I was in was it 2009 or 2010? I can't remember exactly. It was around that time I moved to Yantai, and I started training Taiji Mantis with my teacher Zhou Zhendong, and I got quite interested in like the history. And he, you know, as I was learning Chinese, he was giving me a lot of these documents and things, and he was like, "Oh, you should translate this to English so people can know more about the history and style." So I set Monkey-Steal Speech up as a website where I was just translating some of this stuff my teacher was giving me, and I was finding just stuff on the Chinese web about Mantis and related styles, and I was translating it and putting it up, and I was doing a little blog as well talking about some of my experiences.
Okay. So, but then at some point you started to think about doing videos and or like documentary style videos, right?
Yeah, I had the idea for quite a long time, but I was always very camera shy. So I kept trying to make videos, and I'd like go out somewhere into the woods in Yantai, and I'd set the camera up and I'd try and talk, and I wanted to like tell some stories about Mantis, or I wanted to explain stuff, but I was always just really camera shy, and I never could do anything. But I kept having this idea. So it was when I met Joshua Viney, who does the Shaolin Yujai videos. I met him in Zhengzhou when I went up there to attend a friend's wedding. And he just started making videos as well. And then he said to me, we should do video. He was going to move to Shanghai. So he's like, hey, when I move to Shanghai, we should do videos together. So we started doing the Jianghu channel, which we only made a few videos. It didn't go on for very long. And then he moved back to the UK. And I'd only just kind of got into that idea of making the videos. And I finally got over my stage fright, and I could talk to the camera, and I started really enjoying doing it. And then he moved away. So I was like, okay, well, what can I do? I don't have anyone I can film these tutorials with. So I was like, oh, well, I speak Chinese. I suppose I could go and do interviews. I could travel around and do interviews. And then I was thinking about these old videos, like that I was saying about, you know, where people had found these old videos of rare styles like Tea Serpent and these other channels. And I thought this stuff was so interesting to see these rare and obscure styles, but you couldn't really, I mean, they were usually just form demonstrations or something. And then, you know, they'd put a bit of, the Tea Serpent guy would put a bit of history. So there wasn't much beyond that. And then, I mean, Yarek's got his website, which was really great. But again, it wasn't, you couldn't see it. So I was thinking, okay, well, I mean, we have more technology than those guys had when they were doing that stuff. So what about I bring the two ideas together and I just do what they're doing? So, and I go and I do what Yarek was doing, where I travel to these places, but I also film and make videos. So I suppose it was the influence of those two guys more than anything. And also the Chris Crudelli's Mind, Body and Kick-Ass Moves, if you remember that TV show.
Okay, cool. To sum up your overall Kung Fu experience in China, how would you do that? What did you experience? What great feats or not so great feats did you see? What do you think about the practice, the overall level of practice, the people doing it?
Well, I think it's very different to what we think it's going to be in the West. I realized that a lot of you get a lot of people that come to China, and disappointed or dissatisfied, which I can completely understand. And I think it's because we have a lot of misunderstandings about how it all works. And I think we have like a Western mindset where we tend to have like a consumer attitude that we think, oh, okay, I want to go to China and find these great masters and they're going to just give me all this. I'm going to pay them money and go to their class and they're going to give me all this knowledge and it's going to be great and they're going to turn me into a master. But, you know, it's really what I found overall is that the onus is really on you. Like, you get out of it exactly what you put into it. Nobody will push you. You know, nobody will be like, okay, you've got to do 50 push-ups today, and you need to be able to do the splits, and you need to do the sparring and this and that. It's really a case of the teacher kind of is there to give you correction and to give you knowledge, but it's like you need to be self-motivated, and you need to know, I guess you need to know how to train, and you need to know what you want to get. So you need to ask the right questions, and you need to put in the work yourself, rather than just expecting, you know, turning up to class and just expecting like them to kind of hand you it on a plate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I thought about like asking the next question. What do you think? How can people acquire Kung Fu? And I would have thought something very similar. I think, like when I went to see my teacher, I mean, the whole learning process was actually quite natural. You just spend a lot of time with your teacher, and then of course he shows you things, but then he also looks if you practice those things, and if you don't, well, everything is kind of wasted anyway. And if you do, then you will at some point reap the fruits and the benefits from your practice. So I think it was a very natural process, and completely different from how we usually learn martial arts in the West, like with the school setting and everything. So apparently our experiences kind of match there.
Yeah, it's something that I found almost throughout China, and also I trained a bit in Hong Kong and a bit in Singapore as well, and I saw the same thing there. It's very personal, you know. It's often in the teacher's home, or you know, just in the park, or just in some space outside, or if you're in the countryside, it's often, you know, they have their own courtyards. So it's not like 7 o'clock, now's class, everybody line up. It's just you kind of come and go, and you do your own thing, and then the teacher will explain things exactly as you said. They'll explain things, they'll show things, they'll talk about some principles, but then it's up to you to go off and practice those.
So
that's what I found.
Would you agree that it's, in a way, it's more individualized practice? Because the group setting is not so kind of, there are not so many restrictions, or like walls in a school, but also like restrictions as in how people have to behave, and it's like the black belts in the front and the white belts in the back, and
it's very personal, and I think it's I mean, we use the names Shifu and Shumu and Shishong, all that, which are like family terms. And I would really say it is very much like a family. I mean, you know, I'd go to my Shifu's home. We'd train outside for an hour or so, and then he'd be like, oh, you want to come up and have some tea? I'd go up to his home, we'd sit and drink tea, and he'd tell me some stories of things past. And, you know, his wife would cook a meal and play with his granddaughter, and you know, when it gets to later in the day, we'd get some alcohol out, and you know, sometimes we would also do some training in his home. Sometimes he'd just talk about stuff. Sometimes we just chat. It was a very informal and very personal thing, and it's a case of like, you need to always have this to really learn properly. I think you need to have this ongoing connection, this ongoing relationship, and it's not really enough just to just to learn it in like what I'd call like a seminar environment where you come for just a week and you learn a form and go home.
What I would completely agree, but I would be interested to as why you are saying this, because is it more about your own attitude towards the skill and your teacher and the art? Is that like the underlying reason?
The underlying reason for
Why it's not the same? You know, sometimes because when you're attending a workshop, maybe the contents you get are actually the same, or even maybe you could even like learn in a more efficient way at a seminar. But something else is lacking, which apparently is needed for acquiring Kung Fu. And what is that which is lacking in the seminar? Is it like the relationship? But what does it mean, like the relationship?
I think it's there's actually a good book I read, probably answers this better than I can. It's called Steal My Art, and it was this guy who learnt with, I think the guy was a student of Zheng Manqing in America. And I always remember because he was saying that he basically was living with this Chinese teacher in America. And he was saying that you had to steal the arts, like he wouldn't give it to you. You had to always be prying and always asking questions. And, you get a little bit of knowledge here, a little bit of knowledge there. And slowly you piece it together. And I think for me, this is the experience that I had as well, in that, like I say, you spend a lot of time with your teacher and a lot of stuff comes outside of the class and outside of the regular practice. And it's just a case of a little bit here, a little bit there, a casual mention of what turns out to be some really important principle, and I think it's a case of, you also, like I say, you need to be self-motivated. You need to be aware of how to ask and how to accumulate this. And you need to be, I guess, always listening, because you don't know when he'll suddenly just be like, oh yeah, back in the day. And then he'll like just very casually mention something that's like a very important part of the system that he just, for some reason, never talks about in class.
What I find interesting is I think like in the West, we sometimes have the idea that these Chinese masters should be kind of idolized. And like recently, I think the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, people started to, for example, use the term Dashi and like the Grandmaster, and because Master is not enough anymore, so it needs to be Grandmaster. And to treat them like almost as holy people who are like untouchable in a way. And I mean, what your experience and mine also is that actually when you learn in China, it's quite the contrary. You're like more in a family setting. So actually you're getting closer and not further apart. And I always thought it's, in a way, it's kind of disrespectful to idolize these people too much, because then I think you can't learn their art. And I think stealing someone's art is actually the biggest respect you can give to someone, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're just people, and I mean, using the word grandmaster and whatever. I mean, it's good clickbait, right? And it's a good way. It's a good way for people to be, for them to sell certificates to naive foreigners. But I mean, really, they're just people. I see a lot of these guys that I see in the West. People will call them grandmaster so and so, master so and so. But when I go and meet them, I mean, I don't want to say any names and badmouth anyone, but so there's this one particular teacher that that my teacher was a good friend of this guy, and I mean he died quite a long time ago, I think in the 90s, and my teacher was telling me that this guy was a very, very crass, very rough guy, and he would come to my shifu's home and he'd be constantly drinking, and when he finished, he'd smash his glass on my shifu's floor, and then he'd spit and swearing in front of my shifu's granddaughter, and he was just a very, very crass person. And I've seen that now certain lineage, I don't want to say who or anything, but a certain lineage has been idolizing this guy, and they've been saying that he's a master, and he's a lineage holder, and he's this and that, and trying to sort of paint this image of this, like, almost like a Confucian gentleman. But like, I know for a fact that's not what this guy was at all. I mean, he was a good martial artist, but he wasn't that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really have too much to do with one another. I mean, manners and your technical skills don't really have to match, I think.
Yeah.
But also, when I listened to you, I thought about one other thing, and that is, if you have like the family bonds in a way, I think one of the most interesting aspects is your dedication to the art. And I see it in Chen-Style Taijiquan, because that's of course my expertise. And sometimes I'm a very liberal thinking person. Yeah, I'm not very like conservative or tight or whatever in most regards. But talking about martial arts, I find it interesting that many people learn from a lot of different teachers. And like in Chen-Style, of course, you can learn there, and you can learn, there are many different teachers. But to me, actually, it doesn't really make sense, because I think these teachers are so different, and you can't actually learn the internal methods, or like, but I don't mean internal in a kind of a stupid sense, but I might mean it in like a practical sense. You can't really learn the internal mechanics and everything if you're like changing from teacher to teacher all the time. I think you have to stay in your lineage to get really into depth. And this is also what I did with my teacher when I got to meet him, and then after I understood the concept of learning in China, because I made a lot of mistakes in China. Yeah, a lot of cultural mistakes.
The same. And learning by making mistake after mistake, right?
And it was that would be another show maybe we can do at one point. But after I understood how it works and how much you can get out of it, I just completely dedicated to Chen-Yu Taiji. And I think it has to do with his dedication. And then also for your teacher, of course, it feels different if you're dedicated to him. He can teach you in a way more, because it's a safer environment for him also to teach, isn't it, like that?
Yeah, I mean, I went all over China, and I did interviews with all different people, all different styles. But at the end of the day, I train Mantis. I mean, my teacher is Zhou Zhendong. I'm dedicated solely to this style. I also I enjoy Shaolin Quan as well. I do some old Shaolin stuff on the side. But I mean, that's more a casual interest than something I'm really throwing myself into. But yeah, I think you definitely, you have to have a teacher and a style and a foundation, because otherwise you end up just with like a mixed bag of tricks, but nothing really substantial. And I've seen people that do this. They go around and they do a little bit here and a little bit there, but you end up really with nothing. And that's what I did when I first went to China as well. I trained with all different people in all different places, and you know, I didn't really have anything substantial. So I was very lucky when I met my teacher that I realized that error, and I realized that I don't need to learn hundreds of styles and all these different forms and different things. I just need to do one thing well.
I thought in advance, I thought about a couple of questions. I know I'm deviating a lot from it now. Sorry about this. But
it's all right.
I thought one of the aspects is maybe the what and the how in martial arts. Like, you know, the what can be quite similar sometimes. Or like if I take Chen-Style or Chen-Clan, Taijiquan, basically across all lineages, the what is kind of the same. You know, it's like, oh, it's the Ilu, the first road, then most usually have the second road. Then, of course, you have some Tuisho practices. depending how the teacher is, you've got applications more or less. And so basically these contents are all the same. So also sometimes there's discussion like, Chen-Style is all the same kind of, like some people are claiming, basically there are no mistakes. And I think on a what level, it kind of, it is like that. But on a how level, the differences can be vast. So because I teach people, and a lot of them, I have like really ample experience from other lineages, and they come and then I teach them, and once they understood that they have to change the how, and I'm not teaching like them some external movement, because usually they can do this, but I'm teaching them the intention and the internal power, how to develop these things. Then suddenly everything becomes really different. And I think this is like something which is quite often in social media. It's difficult to talk about these things, to really differentiate between the what and the how. Can you relate to that?
Yeah. I mean, it's like I say. I mean, all styles of mantis have really the same ideas. I mean, we have different forms depending on lineage, but I suppose, yeah, it's how you perform the movements, the body mechanics, I guess you could call it the engine, but it's kind of a modern word, but I've heard people using it a lot. The engine, I guess, is going to be different. I mean, the end result will be the same, but you have to go through like one, full process. And I think you can only really do that by putting yourself into one style with one teacher for a prolonged period of time. Because it's like building blocks, and you learn this thing first, and then you learn this, and then you learn this, and everything builds on top of the other. And I think if you were to, like, say, learn a bit from this teacher and then go off and learn a bit from that teacher and then a bit from someone else, you're not going to be getting those building blocks, because there's going to be lots of subtle differences that are going to be contradicting. Even if the end result is really going to be the same, the details will contradict each other and I think inhibit you from ever really developing.
But also,
does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think there's also one thing kind of difficult, because I mean, we have some theoretical concepts in a lot of Chinese martial arts, and like the Wai-Sanfa, the external connections. And I think you have that in Shaolin. I think you have that in Taichi Mantis, right? The external connection.
Not exact. I mean, we have ideas that are the same gist, but it's not specifically called six harmonies. It's the same idea.
But you have that across different martial arts, actually.
Yeah.
And but sometimes the concept, it has the same name, but it's applied in a different way. And even like in the same martial art, like in Chen-Style, when I see practitioners of other lineages, like they talk about Wai-Sanfa, but actually I don't see it, So because they apply it probably in a different way, and it has nothing to do with how we apply it. So I think that's also sometimes difficult talking about similarities and differences in martial arts. It's the what and the how, but also sometimes the how, it has the same name, but it's differently done also,
Yeah, well, I mean, Chinese language is very abstract, and especially if you're looking at classical Chinese, these old texts which were written hundreds of years ago were written in a very abstract language, and as they got disseminated, I mean, I think the martial arts really is a product of the late Ming to early Qing dynasty, that sort of era. So like 16th, 17th century, that's also the time that the printing press really became a thing in China. So I suppose as these, written materials got disseminated over a large area,
and we see the same in European.
People are going to be receiving these writings, and they might interpret them in vastly different ways, which then over hundreds of years is going to evolve, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think we see a very similar process in the European martial arts. You know, with the sword fighting techniques and everything.
Okay. Yeah.
Talhofer and all his disciples, and then they kind of disseminated, and then book printing was developed, and so we have very similar sketches. Sometimes I think if you wouldn't recognize the sketches from the clothing and everything, where it's from, I think the techniques are sometimes so similar. You wouldn't, most people wouldn't recognize that one is European and one is Chinese, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the.
Well, I suppose the end posture is always going to be the same, but it's the transition. And that's why I was looking at, there's a lot of talk about Taijiquan's 32 postures, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen, but there are lots of people in China claiming to teach the original Taijiquan's 32 form. There's loads of them, all in different provinces. But I mean, this manual only had still pictures.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that explains the transition, which means that all these different styles have got very, very weird forms, and they can look nothing like each other. And I wonder if any of them really had any connection at all to Taijiquan, or if it's just somebody got this book and looked at it, maybe even 100 or 200 years ago. I mean, it might be an old system, but if that old system was even founded just on a book.
Maybe the connection is that somebody looked at the book.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
You know, we have this I mean, this is a different topic, but it's more like about the research in Chinese martial arts. I think, I mean, we have this in Taiji when somebody was found the Taiji theory like 250 kilometers away from Zhenjiabou, and everybody was always like, oh, how can they be connected? And probably the easy answer is it was connected by the guy who found it and by nothing else. You know,
yeah,
probably he found a theory, or he wrote it himself, which was not connected in another way to what he practiced before. It was only connected through him. That's like the Sherlock Holmes kind of answer, you know, the simple answer. Don't go looking to construct hundreds.
Yeah, well, I mean, people in those days, I mean, martial arts was quite prevalent because people obviously had to, you know, there was, without real police and things like that, and with China being so large and banditry and things like that, you know, a lot of people had to protect themselves and protect their villages and protect their homes. So it stands to reason that people had their own system of martial arts already. And then perhaps they received some kind of manual or some kind of writing, some theoretical stuff. And if they were lucky enough to be able to read, or they at least had hired a scholar or somebody that could come and read it to them, that they could then retrofit what they already had to fit this theoretical, you know, this theoretical material.
Yeah, of course. I mean, with Taijiquan, it's a bit. I mean, of course, he was a very outstanding character, and so it's also reasonable that a lot of militia would probably know his works. And so the militia in the villages and then the martial artists were also probably quite often actually the same people. And so the influence of Taijiquan on martial arts might have been more than just people reconstructing what he did a couple of centuries later. But it's very difficult to actually know. I mean, with his postures, it's just the amount of postures which are like have the same name and a very similar shape to Taijiquan is, of course, it's quite astounding. So it would be probable that there's some more connection than someone just reading the book, but of course nobody can know for sure.
Well, I think he compiled they was stuff that was popular at the time, if I'm correct, that he took what he thought was the most useful 32 postures out of what people were doing. And I suppose back then, a lot of stuff was long fist, wasn't it? I mean, long fist was the most widespread, martial art in northern China, and you can get it as far west as Gansu and as far east as Yantai or Qingdao. And I mean, that's a huge distance. I mean, it'd be like, I don't know, going from the west of England all the way to like the east of Germany. I don't know, I'm just guessing at the distance there, but a lot. So I suppose there's probably a lot of just widespread and popular, this stuff was probably kind of common knowledge. And also a lot of these postures, when you look at the names, they take a lot of inspiration from theatre, from mythology, from these heroic figures. And I suppose as I'm not saying that, I know there are some people that have made these claims that martial arts comes from theatre and all that. I don't think that's the case. I think that's taken out of context. But what I can say is that these theatre performers, opera performers, they would travel around, and give performances in village to village for festivals and things. And young men would watch these. I mean, it was the only entertainment. It was like Rambo or Predator of the time, right? So you'd watch these heroes in these plays and you'd feel inspired, and then you'd have these postures, these very proud and angry postures, and you'd want to imitate those people that you'd seen on stage. And I guess that there would be an aspect of that being incorporated into your martial arts. So I mean, I suppose it's multifaceted. There's a lot of different explanations for why this stuff's also widespread.
Of course, yeah. I mean, people also, maybe they had different jobs also. So you could be a performer, but you could also teach martial arts in the evening. And so, I mean, it's not a either or necessarily.
Yeah.
But what do you think about theory and practice in martial arts? Because I sometimes, I think like, I mean, I'm a very analytical person anyway, so maybe it's also just me. But for me, the concepts and the words and how you practice are very important. And I think if you don't have any understanding of Chinese and you don't want to learn a couple of like terms, actually it will be very difficult to learn Taijiquan, for example. Like you have to know what silk reading is, or what dantian is, or what the crotch is, and what the waist is, what is meant by these terms, because otherwise you can't put it into practical bodily actions. Would you agree with that, or would you think that's like...
Oh yeah, I think the language is really, really important, because, and I think this would be, when people ask me about, say, advice for martial art training, I always say, look, if you want to really understand the art, like not just get good at fighting is one thing, but if you want to really understand the art as a whole, the language is really important, because I mean, language is how you think, therefore it's how you construct a system, and it's how you view the world. So to understand the system, the art as a whole, I think you need to understand how the people that create it think. And it's interesting you just said about waist and hips and things, because the Chinese words and the English words don't really line up, right? I mean, yao is not actually waist, it's kind of like your lower back and waist, and qua is not exactly hips, it's like your what do you call it, the pelvic girdle.
It's a pelvic girdle, or the inguinal crease, I think you call it in English. But
yeah, so the terminology, I mean, these are just a couple of simple examples of things that just don't translate fully from Chinese to English. And if you look at those simple examples, you can imagine how some more abstract terms, I mean, a good one is like qi. People are always like, what's qi? Where's qi?
Yeah.
Does it exist? Does it not exist? But it's a linguistic term, and you need to switch your mind into a Chinese way of thinking, and then you realize, oh, actually, it is quite a useful concept, and It's not something that exists or doesn't exist. It's just a way of describing certain processes. But if you understand that, then it does help with your understanding of the art. But if you don't understand it, then you're always looking for some kind of mystical energy and wondering whether it exists or not.
Yeah, and then sometimes I think your practice can even be like, it can have bad effects, because you're like, people are thinking like, oh, chi is going somewhere, chi, and they're like out of their heads. And actually, I think because what we do in Chinese martial arts is also like we kind of, or I think it's most do like, they create something like a holistic, integrative approach to body and mind. There's no separation, but you always try to connect and link and integrate. So in a way, it doesn't make sense to think about something like some overflowing energy, because you're kind of unconnecting yourself. It's more practical to think, like you said, what is chi? I mean, and chi can, of course, it comes from philosophy. It's from Taoism. You find it in theology. You find it like as an everyday term. So it has so many meanings, and yeah, like you say, it doesn't really make sense to ask, is there chi? Is it true or not? It's you can't answer. And I think also like terms like, for example, waist or like yao would be from teacher to teacher. I think you could have different definitions. So it's also not like you can look into a Chinese textbook and find a definite meaning on some of the issues. Or like qua. I think it's a very specific term also for a specific martial art. It might be similar, but I think it's not always the same.
Yeah, well, even like using the word like jiao for foot, I've heard people say jiao for like the entire leg. So,
okay.
you know.
Yeah, I haven't, but it's next time I know.
Yeah, no, I've heard people talk about jiao referring to the entire leg quite a lot as well, quite a few times actually. So, yeah, I mean, we've got to kind of throw away our Western mindset and just throw ourselves fully into trying to understand their worldview and their way of thinking. But what I find funny with that is nowadays, and I guess especially you being a Taiji person, you probably see this all the time, is people making all these buzzwords. And I mean, chi is the classic buzzword, right? They're like, oh, come and develop your chi. But now now the new buzzword is intention. Everybody's talking about use your intention, use your E. And I think it's again, when you're trying to import a word from Chinese into English or German or whatever other language, people then will think that it's some kind of mystical, like it's a physical thing that they're trying to get, and they won't understand that it is just a word in another language. It's something very mundane.
Yeah, and it's but it's still a good word, but it's something very practical, and this is also, I mean, this is like qi yi with all these psychological or kinesthetic terms. They are a bit elusive anyway, aren't they? They're also in our language. I think, I mean, English and German, they're quite similar anyway. So I think they're still elusive in a way, but they're still good concepts. I mean, in like modern sports, you would also talk a lot about psychology or motivation or whatever. And all these things are in a way elusive. But you have to.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that, yeah, I mean, they're very important terms, but I just mean that they're misused a lot, I should say.
Of course. No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Also, I think it's like sometimes people take side aspects and present them as like main aspects of the art. And like if you take something like Qi, or like, oh, Taijiquan is a Qi practice, and then I know after 10 years there will be no Kung Fu coming from this, because it can't. But it's like, if it if you understand the body structure, the stances, the applications, blah blah blah, then at some point, of course, your mindset and your breathing and everything, it will be important. But it's at a later stage, and it's not like the main aspect. You can't make a group out of an aspect like this. You know, like you practice your chi. Go and practice your chi. That's not what should you do now. You know, you can't practice like that. So you have to become much more specific, I think, with these terms. Like what is the foot doing? What is the crotch doing? What is the center doing? And then at some point, what is your E doing? What is your mind doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I understand what you mean. I mean, Fang Sung is, I think, another word which is just a buzzword.
Yeah, I hear it. That's the other one. E and Song are these words that are just thrown around all the time these days, and I think people make Song. I think people make more out of it than they should really.
And I think I will call this video we're doing here, Will explain, from Monkey See Speech, explains E, Chi, and Sung. Just
Grandmaster, the Grandmaster reveals the ancient Chinese secrets.
Two more questions maybe, and then I'll, because I think it's your evening, it's still my midday. I thought it's a very interesting topic to think about, because at the moment there's a lot of talk about traditional martial arts being not effective, maybe in competition fights. And now I'm just talking about the traditional Chinese martial arts, not about the sports disciplines we also have in China, which are more competitive. I think we have to kind of separate these two things. And I think, when I see my teacher and what we do in our lineage, I think the way the body method works is really top notch. Also, if I compare it to like Western athletics and everything, I think the way Chinese martial arts teach Chen-Fa body method is very advanced. Also, especially with the integration to psychology and I think it's a very good method. If it's like taught well and not just with buzzwords, but in a practical kind of sense. But what I also noticed looking around and talking to a lot of friends is that a lot of the traditional Chinese martial arts sometimes don't have a good set of how to practice partner routines and how to create building blocks of partner applications, and also to create like the social or the cultural boundaries where you can practice martial arts in a safe environment. What do you think about this? Is it too crass an opinion?
Yeah, I think there's a few things I could touch on here. So first of all, the issue of sparring in martial arts, I think, is a good one to start with. So I talked about this when I interviewed Byron. I think he explained pretty well the whole movement from traditional martial arts into modern martial arts and how controlled sparring and things like that came around. So I'll let people listen to that if they're interested. But as far as within traditional Chinese martial arts, I think, in my opinion, from what I've seen and from what I've heard from talking to different teachers within very different provinces and vast areas of China, so I can say that this is quite a widespread phenomenon. It's not just limited to one style or one area, is that I don't think the training methods have really changed very much in the last, say, 100 years. What I think's changed is the kind of people who practice. So if you go back to sort of late Qing dynasty, this sort of time when Chinese martial arts, you could call that like the kind of golden era of martial arts, so to speak. People then were practicing, I mean, there was, working in the armed escort agencies, like the bodyguards and cargo escorts, caravan escorts. There were village militias. Bandits practiced martial arts as well. There was all kinds of people that were involved in violence on a daily basis. And I mean, even like looking at, when my teacher was young, he was telling me that Yantai, the city where he grew up, was a very dangerous place, and that fighting was just a given. Like, lads would fight, you have some drinks and then you have an argument and things break out in a fight. You walk home late at night, someone will take advantage of you and there will be a fight. So it was kind of just a given that martial artists were fighting. So I suppose they didn't really need, like nowadays, the kinds of people that will go and learn traditional martial arts, people like you, me, the majority of people, we're on the whole, we're middle class, people from a pretty comfortable life. We haven't really experienced extreme violence. So if we go to a martial art class and we want to get good at fighting, we need to be hitting pads, we need to be learning how to block, how to defend our head, how to hit somebody. Like, we need all that kind of fundamental stuff because that's not really in our nature. That's not how we grew up. But you look at these people like 100 years ago, and for them, that was all just normal. Like, you would go, you want to learn a martial art. You don't need a teacher to tell you how to punch someone in the face because you've done it hundreds of times. You need someone to give you a very special body method. How can I generate power more efficiently? How can I use my body in a better way? How can I use the opponent's force against them? What strategies can I use to enter? What strategies can I use to avoid? What strategies can I use to finish the fight quickly? So it's more like giving yourself an edge, becoming better, than it is about learning to fight from the ground up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the same. This is why I think, like, because if the expectation is people should be fighting with traditional martial arts, I think what we need to do more and more is nowadays to, like, also develop a methodology to teach, to like bridge the gap between usage and body method. Because just like you said, I think the methodology for that kind of area is not necessarily there in all traditional martial arts. Like, when I teach martial arts aspects, of course I teach like applications, like form applications, Jungfa, like techniques. I will also teach how to integrate them into freer settings. So I kind of create formats where you can practice out certain things, but in a kind of a safe environment. And then, of course, you can change the environment all the time, like with protection, no protection, how free is it, with which techniques can you explore, blah, blah, blah. So all the sides always kind of know what they do. And so I think like this, you can kind of deconstruct the whole martial setting and create different formats, which then create a whole in a way. And you can still use your Shenfa, and it's not just like arbitrary random sparring practice, but it's still it's coming from the same ideas and concepts. But I think people should really think about how to make that transition possible. And this is also how I understood you, what you also would find useful or practical.
Yeah, I suppose that the challenge is how to have a good mythology. And I personally think that having something like Sanda or kickboxing or something on the side is really good, because it's not going to give you the martial arts, but at least it's going to teach you the feeling of being hit and hitting people and performing on, you know, keeping calm under pressure. Somebody's really trying to smash you in the head, and you've got to keep calm and try to use your technique. But again, it's going to be limited, and a lot of traditional martial art techniques are not designed for that kind of environment, or that scenario. So I think having like sanda, kickboxing, sparring, something like that, it's only going to be another bridge, maybe just like one step up from push hands or sticky, but it's not going to be that end goal.
Yeah, I think sometimes the strategies of don't really match. This is I think there's nothing wrong doing sanda and kickboxing, and not at all. I think it's just sometimes the strategies, how you want to engage in a fight, and how you want to also end the fight. Sometimes they're different in different martial arts. So I think
Yeah,
you find a bridge how to make your martial art work, also in a free setting. But of course, everything kind of helps also.
Yeah, well, that's why I said that I think this kind of sanda type sparring is only really a bridge. It's not the end result, because I mean, just like push hands push hands is not going to teach you the end result of the art, is it? Because you're already beginning from contact, and there are certain parameters you have to work within. So it trains one aspect. And I think the sparring is the same. It trains one aspect, but you need to try and bring all of these pieces together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in Taijiquan literature, or we usually, you know, when we talk about stances and everything, it's always they should be very stable and very agile. But what you see nowadays is usually people who maybe are stable, but you see very few agile Taijiquan people. And of course, if you once do sparring once in your lifetime, you'll notice, it's quite useful to be moving and to be quick.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I think Taijiquan is probably one of the worst culprits for it, that they just get stuck in the push hands mindset, and that the push hands mindset has become like the be all and end all, and that's your like the creme de la creme of your art. And it's interesting. I mean, me and you, we talked about this before privately. I remember the evolution of push hands, and I think that in the past it was probably more of just a tool, whereas I mean, correct me on this if I'm wrong, because I'm not a Taiji person, but my personal feeling, my opinion on this is that push hands started as a training tool, and as Taijiquan went to Beijing, and it got taken up by upper classes as opposed to villagers, push hands became like a civilized way of challenging people. It was a way that you could demonstrate your skill and test somebody else's skill without really hurting each other. Would you say that's
I think your chi are in a chaotic state at the moment.
It's what, sorry?
I think your I and your chi are in a chaotic state at the moment.
Maybe, yeah.
No,
yeah, sorry, I'm going to the topic of it.
No, of course you're right. I mean, also, we usually the old names are like Dasho, you know, like hitting hands, or you have like the scraping hands. You have different names, and they're all, I think, hinting also to what the use is. And I think it's a really good exercise. But yeah, just like you say, it's done. People are getting stuck with it, and also, like, I mean, in my lineage, we do the pushing hands quite differently from the other lineages in Chen also. You know, the intention is quite different, and the way you work with Pongjin, and you work with controlling the other person, and so on. So if you always, I think, in Taijiquan, because people always want to relax. So when they go into push hands practice, they think, I have to relax now. And then they're working with like floppy arms and stuff. And what can you do with floppy arms? You can do Shuaijiao techniques. You know, you can go in, and because then you don't have to do anything with your, like, you don't have to hold the power, or you can do like slappy techniques, you know, so you can also have arms. But in terms of real control of body mechanics, I think it's no use. I think this is happening quite often in modern Treisho practices. Also because of the competition side of Treisho. And I don't have anything against competitions. We also did competitions early on, and I think it's like one aspect you can practice. There's nothing wrong with it. But if that becomes like the main practice, then I think the whole thing can go astray. And it's also, some people want to be like a grandmaster, you know? So they're also trying to make themselves like unpushable. And this also comes from pushing hands practice, you know, they're like, oh, look, the other person can't move me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm a Taijiquan teacher and I have some knowledge of how to teach Taijiquan. And I can tell you that there are tricks as a teacher you can basically teach to someone, and these people become unpushable, you know.
These tricks are not that difficult. I mean, I've learned some of them as well, right? How you look unmovable.
But after understanding how that works, I completely lost my interest in it, because I thought, well, I didn't learn Kung Fu to own some tricks. So I thought, okay, it's useful to be stable, but it's also useful to be agile, and you have to connect it really in a yin-yang kind of way. Like it's the same thing. It's not two things, but then you have to be honest to yourself and go that path. And my teacher, Chen-Yu, he's always making fun about all these demos where someone's standing like this, you know, because it's always like, oh, you can just make people fall. You know, it's 10 people in a row pushing. They have less power than one person pushing, because the front has to like fight against 9 people behind him, you know. So actually, one person has less power lining up. So all these demos, actually, I don't think they are really useful for traditional martial arts. I think people nowadays realize.
I suppose that they're the internal version of Shaolin. You know, Shaolin will break the metal bars over their heads and throw the needles through glass and do these, you know. This is like the internal version of it. They're almost like internal circus tricks.
Yeah. Maybe as the last question for today, it's a bit nerdy, the question, but I think it's in the shared interest of the two of us. It's about scientific research. What do you think? How should proper research on Chinese martial arts be done? And what are the most common mistakes people do?
Research. You know, I think until recently, I've been very guilty of this myself. So this is something that going forward, I want to change with my own stuff. I mean, now that I'm doing a master's degree and that I'm learning proper research methods as part of that, it's something I didn't really understand before. So it's going forward, I want to try and take these academic standards into my own martial arts research. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of people that are engaging in what they say research, because they don't have like the educational background, they don't necessarily follow. Like I've seen people jump to conclusions a lot, and you know, what's the saying, like they'll have like 2 things and they'll be like, okay, well, these are obviously correlated somehow. Or they'll try, you know, they have a lot of confirmation bias. They'll try and force things to fit their preconceived idea or their hypothesis. But what I would like to try and do, and you know, what I would like to see other people do, I mean, it's not my place to tell other people what to do, but something that I think would be good for martial arts going forward would be to see more people referencing sources. Like if they're going to say this, you know, if they're going to make a statement about something, if they can have, you know, a source, like where did they get this from? And then is that a credible source? And also like peer reviewing things as well. I think, to have these two things, because if you were to make a statement in like the scientific or academic community, you'd have to have these two things, otherwise no one would take you seriously. But in martial arts, people will just be like, well, my Shifu says, or according to this oral tradition, and they'll take these things to be a truth, and then they'll kind of perpetuate things which are not necessarily accurate. So yeah, that's my thought on it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I also think like people should just like kind of differentiate between like literary sources, like written sources, or is it like an oral tradition, and this is how I know things, or is it like also in the practical tradition how I like say like what is your source, and then you can still discuss what the source is about or whatever, and you have different opinions about it. But I think that would be really, really helpful if people, and then also to differentiate, like, is it something I know from a certain source, or is it a speculation? And I think a lot of Facebook discussions would really benefit from it, because like there's no use arguing about an opinion, and it's okay to have an opinion, but if it's like if people think their opinion is a truth, then I think there's a lot of argument coming into the whole issue. So I think speculation will...
critical thinking, I suppose I would say then, if I wanted to sum that up. It would be nice to see more critical thinking in martial arts.
Yeah, and also, I mean, most people have some sort of affiliation to a certain teacher. So of course, in a way, I think they can never be objective. And I'm actually the same. Like I will never be objective, but I'm quite blatant about it. So I'm not trying to be.
Well, no one can ever be truly objective. I mean, we're humans, right? We're subjective creatures.
Yeah, and I think also what would help is like to not only talk about one issue or like one aspect, but also to always view the surroundings, like the cultural, sociological surroundings of that certain martial arts issue. Like, does it make sense? Can it be validated? Is it possible? Is it probable? You know, because sometimes in martial arts research, I think the problem we have is like, if we're looking 120 years back in time, we will only have, if we are lucky, we have one source. And so it's not reliable. It's not, we never have like an outside view. So I think we always have to take other, like we have to build up a context of
yeah. This is, I guess this is one thing that I want to do more of. And I've tried to do a bit in my videos, and it's something over time I'm going to try and improve and focus on more, is I really want to get people to understand the cultural, social, geographical context of martial arts. Because I mean, like, say we look at, I mean, a very, very simple example is why a northern style is done this way and why a southern style is done that way. And you can look at, the geography is the obvious one people always say, but there's a lot more to it. And if we look at, like, say, Taijiquan, well, why is Taijiquan done the way it is? There's a whole lot of factors to it. It's not just a case of saying, this is the best martial art in the world, which you as a Taiji guy, I'm sure you'll think, and I'd say the same about Mantis. But if we try and look objectively, well, why is Mantis done the way it is, and how is that related to the area where Mantis comes from? And then what about, well, where does Taijiquan come from, and why is it done that way? And what about Baguazhang? Why is that done like it is? So yeah, to try and show people the environment, and I suppose the people as well, because I found that going from province to province and you meet these different people, you see that they all have very different characters. And if you look at, like, you meet, say, a Shandong person and you talk to them and spend time with them, you can see that when you watch a Mantis form, you can see, oh, that really fits the personality. Or you see like a Fujian, for example, like a white crane form, you meet a Fujian person, you're like, hey, yeah, you know, the personality really fits the way they do the movements. So there's a cultural aspect as well.
Interesting. I've never thought about it that way, but it's good to think about that way. No, I think when you start doing a martial art, you always think, oh, like this is the best martial art. You know, it's like 20 years ago, I don't know, whatever. I thought, yeah. But nowadays, I'm just really relaxed with all these issues because people are doing martial arts for different reasons anyway. So, and you become as good as you get because you practice or you are talented in a certain way, and you just, and it just, you can.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is really up to natural talent, more natural talent and hard work.
Yeah. So thanks so much for the interview. Looking forward, what will be your next Kung Fu project, and maybe you can let us know something about it.
Well, I mean, with coronavirus, who knows when, but I'm hoping once I can get back to China to go to Hebei province, to Changzhou and the surrounding area and look at some of these classical northern systems like Cuojiao, you know, which is the famous kicking style, Fanziquan, which is an influence for a lot of different styles like Mantis and Bagua, and well, a lot of styles. Liu Hemen, Tantui, Changquan. So yeah, there's these kind of classical old northern styles, and try to build like more of a picture of I guess you could call them like the prototype styles. You know, the styles that influenced a lot of the contemporary styles we do today.
Cool. Thanks, Will, for joining this session. And finding the time. Maybe people can also look.
And thank you for taking the time to interview me.
No, it was really interesting. I think we chatted so much privately, so I thought maybe there were some things interesting for the rest.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.